Hello, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome back to my channel, and today I want to go over how you can make money from doing old raids to current trials. This is also solo friendly, but a majority of these will require an 8-man, although it is also not needed because some of these things can be purely just bought off the market board, and sometimes it's even better that way. So with that being said, let's get into it. And actually, before I start the video, if you would like to join me in my streams on Twitch, I stream on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 p.m. and that's GMT +3. So if you would like to come out and hang out and do some crafting together, then I would hope to see you there. So to start, old raids. Now, my favorite old raid to solo is the final coil of Bahamut turn 2. I can solo this with my red mage at an item level of 529. The trick is to keep your burst for the 3 eggs that spawn, and you have to kill them very quickly, else they will become immune. You also have to clear 1 wing, unalive yourself, and then clear the 2nd wing before you can do the boss. I recommend taking a class that is burst heavy so you can easily kill the eggs before they become immune. Other than that, the boss is very simple. You hardly need any healing, and don't go in the middle of the boss. Don't go in his hitbox, trust me. From the boss itself, you get Neo Aether Stones, and the most valuable one is the leg gear ones. As you can see, the Neo Aether Stone leg gear is expensive in and of itself, but the items you can craft with this are even more so. As you can see, one of them just sold for just under 500k, and that is including aiming, fending, striking, scouting, casting, and healing. I just sold this one for 491k, and that was well over 300k in profit. So even if you bought these Aether Stones yourself, you would still make a huge profit. The next soloable raid is the final coil of Bahamut turn 4. You do have to be mindful of mechanics such as the spinning dragon and Bahamut himself, but the damage is hardly there and you can easily solo this. You receive the Neo Aether Stones of body gear, and these are not quite as expensive as the pants counterpart, but the crafted items do sell very well and for quite a bit. So what is craftable includes the Dreadworm Armor of Fending, the Dreadworm Mail of Fending, the Dreadworm Cyclist of Striking, the Dreadworm Cyclist of Scouting, the Dreadworm Tabard of Aiming, the Dreadworm Robe of Casting, and the Dreadworm Robe of Healing. Next is the second coil of Bahamut turn 4. Now, this is not entirely soloable unless you're a paladin. If you are someone like me, who either doesn't have a paladin max level or their paladin is not very high in item level, you can take one person with you, someone who has at least a res or is also a paladin, since a lot of these mechanics will just one-shot you. The only trick I can tell you about really is to keep the rocks as far apart as you can so the little rock boys won't come together and become immune. What you'll receive though is a high Allegan Aether Stone of body gear, and in of itself it is still not as expensive as the leg gear one, but you can craft a lot of popular and beautiful gear that also sells for quite a bit. And first is the heavy High Allegan Coat, High Allegan Cuirass of Maiming, High Allegan Cuirass of Striking, the High Allegan Coat of Maiming, the High Allegan Coat of Aiming, the High Allegan Coat of Casting, and finally the High Allegan Coat of Healing. Now, some of these are a lot cheaper than some other ones. I recommend doing the heavy High Allegan Coat and the High Allegan Coat of Healing. These sell extremely often and for quite a good price, but of course, just check what sells best on your server. Next is Trials. Now, all the Reborn ones are completely soloable, albeit Leviathan is a little bit annoying if you don't know what you're doing. But other than that, if you are at least item level 520, 510, you will 100% be able to solo these. If your damage is a little bit too slow or not enough, remove can be a little bit annoying, but if you have something that can self-heal like a red mage or a paladin, you will be totally Gucci. Now for these trial items, I'm gonna go over 3 key points for each of these mats and whether or not it is worth it to farm these yourself or just go on the market board and buy them. And starting from around Reborn is the Howling Eye Extreme. The 3 key points I'll go over for each of these trial mats is the weapons that they can create, the housing items, and the barding. Now the item that Garuda gives you once you kill her is the Vortex Feather, but as you can see, this item is extremely cheap and well in abundance. I recommend instead of spending time soloing the trial, since it is also not 100% guaranteed drop, I would rather buy these out than soloing it. And the best selling and for the most expensive Garuda weapons is the Vial of the Vortex for around 150k to 70k, the Blood of the Vortex, and the Spine of the Vortex. Next is the Crag Heart from the Naval Extreme. The item goes for quite a bit on my server, but it is averaging at around 3k, so it depends how much gil and how much investment you want to do into these items that you'll craft. The Naval is extremely easy and very quick to run, so if it is averaging around 10k on your server, then it would be a good idea to spend a few minutes soloing and getting as many of these Crag Hearts as possible. For weapons, there is of course a lot you can craft with the Crag Heart, but the Tremor Axe is one of the best to craft. Next is the Tremor Cudgel, then the Tremor Guillotine. The next trial item is the Ball of Embers Extreme. It is extremely quick to solo and drops the Inferno Horn. Now it is quite a bit, 5k, and depending on your range of profit from crafting items and buying this material, it might be worth it to go in solo for a few minutes and get as much of these Inferno Horns as you can. The best weapons to craft with the Inferno Horn is the Inferno Battle Axe, the Inferno Katana, and the Inferno Rapier. Next is the Thorn March Extreme, which drops the Kingly Whisker. Now, this is extremely cheap on my server, so I definitely wouldn't waste time soloing it, but a lot of the weapons are extremely profitable and sell extremely quickly. The Mog Bow and the Mog Staff both go over 50k, sometimes into the 100k gil marks. The Mog Axe is also very profitable, also the Mog Sword, the Mog Tana, the Mog Gun, and the Mog Foil, and Mog Globe. There is a lot of these that I just listed, but of course, make sure on your server that what you're crafting is profitable. It might be different from mine. This is just on the Chaos Data Center. The housing item that you can craft with the Kingly Whisker is actually quite profitable and sells decently well, and in my opinion, is the best mailbox. Every time you get a letter, it spins around and makes music, so no wonder it sells quite well. Next is the Whirl Eater Extreme. Now, you can get 2 crafting items, and the first crafting item you can get is the Leviathan's Barb, and then the Barb of the Whirl. So with Leviathan's Barb, you can't make any weapons, but you can make a few housing items. Next is the Tidal Barding, which does sell for quite a bit, and for the investment you put into it is very decent. And the minion you can make is the Wind Up Leviathan, and it is also very decent in profit, and also sells decently well. Next is using the Barb of the Whirl. You also can't make any weapons with this, since the Leviathan and the Shiva weapons are bought from a vendor. Next is the Striking Tree Extreme. You also receive 2 items from Ramu, and it is the Large Levin Orb and the Levin Orb. So to start, the Large Levin Orb does sell for quite a bit if you want to go and farm him. It is around 5k to 8k, and you can craft a lot of weapons with these. And the first weapon that sells for quite a bit is the Mighty Thunderbolt, then the High Agitator Gavel, the Mighty Thunder Dart, the Mighty Thunder Strike, and the Mighty Thunder Stroke. Next is the Levin Orb. Now, the Levin Orb itself is extremely cheap, and I would, of course, buy this out instead of farming for it, but you can craft 3 things with this. And first is the minion Wind Up Remove, which sells pretty decently on my server, Louisoix, but overall it is around 11k, which isn't so bad. Next is the 11 Barding, which is 35k on Louisoix, but it is around 20k overall on Chaos. But for the investment made, it is pretty good in profit. And next is the Plasma Lamp, which is expensive on my server, and it is bought pretty often, but you could get varying degrees of profitability. But for 90k and it's selling decently well, I would definitely craft this for the profit made. The next trial and final trial in Reborn is the Ak-Afa Amphitheater. You get 2 items from Shiva, which is the Ice tier and the Diamond tier. There are no craftable Shiva weapons, they are bought from a vendor. But to start, the Ice tier is not very expensive, and I would not farm for this. But you can craft the Shiva minion, which goes around 15k. The next item is the Diamond tier, which goes for around 2 to 3k on my server, but it really depends which server you're on, because it can go all the way down to 300. With this, you can craft the Diamond Chandelier, which is a lot more profitable, and depending on how expensive it is, if it's anything like my server at 99k, then you can definitely make a profit with this. You can also craft the Ice Barding, which sells decently well, and if the margin of profitability is also like my server, I definitely recommend it. Now we can start with Heavensward. The first trial is the Limitless Blue. This is not soloable due to 2 ads that cannot be together. I recommend doing this with 2 people. And the Limitless Blue Extreme drops 2 mats, the Expanse Baleen and the Bismarck's Baleen. The Expanse Baleen is extremely cheap, and I wouldn't bother farming for this. But with this, you can craft all the weapons, and the best weapons to craft for the most profit is the Endless Expanse Cane, the Endless Expanse Shield, and the Endless Expanse Astrometer. And with the Bismarck's Baleen, it is also cheap, not as cheap as the Expanse one, but cheap enough where there's no point in farming it. With this, you can craft the Expanse Barding, which at 13k is not so bad. And next is the Expanse Fountain, which 1 million is an artificial price. Since this item does not sell very well on my server, it does in fact sell though. 912, then 6, then 92. As the more recent sales, and from 100 to 300k is a decent price to post this at. So I would not completely ignore this item, and if you are going to craft with the Bismarck's Baleen, this is the thing I would craft. Next is the Trial Thok As Thok, and it drops the Hive 4-Wing. This is soloable, and quite easily so, but it is quite cheap, so you can determine how expensive the item has to be worth soloing for you. This crafts a bunch of weapons, a housing item, and a minion. The most profitable weapons to craft with the Hive 4-Wing is the Dead Hive Spear, then the Dead Hive Cane, the Dead Hive Claymore, the Dead Hive Katana, and the Dead Hive Rapier. And the minion is the Wind Up Ravana, which is a decent price on my server and sells quite often. Next is the Ravana's 4-Wing, which is also not worth farming, but you can craft 2 items with this. And that's the Hive Barding, and at 27k that is a decent amount for the investment. And the Hive Ceiling Fan, this price that's listed is artificial, but you can easily sell this for 100k, which would definitely be worth the investment. we're actually going to skip Thornton's Rain because there is no item that drops where it's used for crafting or is sellable other than the music scroll, but I still thought it was worth mentioning since you can still indeed craft the round weapons, but you just don't need a trial mat for them. So of course, check if these items are worth selling on your server. The next trial is Nidhogg's Rage. You'll probably need 2 people to finish this or a well-geared paladin. From here on out, bosses are not soloable. Nidhogg drops the Nidhogg's scale, and it is a bit more hefty than the rest of the items on this list, simply because it's not as soloable as the rest. So the first profitable weapon is the Seeing Horde Spear, the Seeing Horde Guillotine, and I think we just found someone buying Gil. That 75 million is a little bit suspicious. And finally, the Seeing Horde Rapier. Always check if these weapons or different weapons are profitable because some of these weapons dropped from the bullshit lock boxes. So you don't want to craft something that you think might be worth 20k but is actually 1k due to them dropping so frequently from these lock boxes. The housing item you can craft is the Nidhogg miniature, but it's not very profitable since the scale is over 10k, but you can buy these miniatures and desynthesize them. And I just desynthesized one and I got 2 scales back. So depending on your luck, this can be profitable if the miniatures are much less than the scale itself. And this goes for any trial mat housing item. If the items are extremely cheap but the trial mat is expensive, you can definitely make a profit from desynthesizing. If of course your desynthesis is high enough level for you to get higher rarity items more often, then you can definitely make a profit that way. The next trial is the Containment Bay S1T7 Extreme. 2 mats drop from this, and it is the Fiend Sap and the Sephiroth Sap. The Fiend Sap itself is extremely cheap and really not worth farming for, but you can make a lot of weapons with this. And the first one being the Edge of the Fiend, the Fists of the Fiend, the Fire of the Fiend, and the Shield of the Fiend. Next is the Sephiroth Sap, and it is a lot more expensive than its counterpart, and the outdoor furnishing is hardly a profit as well. But I recommend getting a bunch of these Sephiroth roots if they are cheap on your server like this is, and desynthesizing them. The next trial is the Containment Bay P1T6 Extreme. The bead itself is extremely cheap and not worth farming for, and absolutely none of the weapons are over the price of 10k, so this is a good low-level craft if you want to make smaller portions of profits each time, but otherwise I wouldn't bother with the weapons. The Sophic Burning is a bit better at around 24k on my server, but it goes down to around 8k. But this is of course server dependent, so make sure you look on what's profitable on your server. But for me, I wouldn't bother with Sophia at all. And the final Heavensward trial is the Containment Bay Z1 T9 Extreme. This is the most profitable item to farm in Heavensward since actually the weapons have only been released in Shadowbringers. So the weapons are actually quite recent. But if you want to farm with around 5 to 8 people, it is totally possible and quite worth it. Now, most of these weapons are around 200k, but even if you spend money on buying the Carapace Fragment, you'll still make around 800k at least. The first trial in Stormblood is the Hula Tribute Extreme, and it is not possible to solo. None of these Stormblood trials are, but you can easily do this with an 8-man, and this drops the Blade of Revelry. Now, there is no crafted weapon just yet. I would personally save this for Endwalker when the trial weapons do indeed come out. This will jump up to 1 million in and of itself, and the weapons will go way over 1 million. But for now, the Blade of Revelry is very easy to farm as an 8-man and well worth since the Blade of Revelry can go up for quite a bit. Although, when you see it go to 111k like it is on Spriggan and Omega right now, I would go and buy them. You're essentially making 900k. The next trial in Stormblood is the Emanation Extreme. The Blissful Shroud cannot craft any weapons, but you can craft a few other things. The Blissful Barding is the best thing to craft with this. It has a high profit margin, and it sells decently quickly. The Lakshmi Miniature actually sells for quite a bit, not very often, but it does indeed sell, and it is decent for the price. The next trial in Stormblood is Shinryu's Domain. This is worth the farm because it is around 600k on my server and down to 400k on other servers. But of course, you can desynthesize the weapon drops that you get from there, and this item sells often and for, of course, quite a bit. I recommend crafting the Gunblade and the Dancer weapons because these are bought most often since these are one of the few glowy weapons that Dancer and Gunbreaker actually have. Otherwise, you're looking at around 200k profit if you bought them at when it's low at around 500k, and you're selling high when the items are around 700k. But of course, mileage varies depending on the server. The next Stormblood's trial is Tsukiyomi's Pain. The material she drops is the Celestial Kimono Fragment, which is definitely worth farming for its price at around 400k to 500k. A lot of these weapons are only around 500k, so you're looking at about 100k profit, so I would actually hold off on crafting too many of these weapons since you can get a lot better mileage with the other weapons and just sell the mat itself. You'll sell a lot more, a lot quicker, and depending on your server, it actually can be worth more than the weapon itself. The next Stormblood trial is the Hell's Cure. At 300k, the Scarlet Telefiller is what you get from farming this. I would much rather farm something else, since of course all these trials require an 8-man, and a lot of the mats are nearly twice as much as this one. It also has a housing counterpart, the Suzaku Wall Hanging, but it is not usually worth it to craft to sell, but it is worth to buy and desynthesize. The Flame-Kissed Grimoire is the only item that is over a 100k profit. The rest of the weapons are only around 50k to 60k, 70k profit. So I would much rather craft other weapons than the Suzaku ones. But of course, depends on your server. On mine, it is around 700k. What I recommend is that if you're saying that your server is the cheapest one, such as Cerberus is right now for this one specifically, I would go and have an alt on a different server, then post that item on that server instead. So if I was on Cerberus, I would come over to Louisaw, post the item here, undercut once in a while, and easily make 700k that way. The final trial in Stormblood is the Wreath of Snakes Extreme. Seryu's scale is what drops from here, and around 300k it is also not so bad to farm for, but the other items are a lot more expensive. The Spine, the Sanctified Lance, and the Sanctified Katana seem to be the most profitable ones, but of course, seeing what works for you and switching servers to post the item on the most expensive ones is your best bet. Finally, we move on to Shadowbringer's trials. Now, of course, a lot of Shadowbringer's trials do not have a crafted weapon out, only Hades does. But even so, we'll start with Titania. The Dancing Wing is quite profitable to farm for at 320k on average in my Chaos data center. The Titania Barding is definitely profitable to craft and is bought quite often, and that goes for the Titania Shadow Box as well. The next Shadowbringer's trial is the Crown of the Immaculate. It drops the Immaculate Wing Blade, and it is not really too great to farm for since it only is at 20k on my server and going even far as low to 4k. I would not bother holding onto this for a crafted weapon later because the trial does not drop weapons at all, but the Blades of Innocence are well worth to craft for if you buy the Wing Blade so cheaply, and the Innocence Barding just as much so. The next Shadowbringer's trial is the Hades Elegy. It drops the Hades Aura Sight, and this is the best item to farm for if you want to sell the base map right now, since this is the only crafted weapon from Shadowbringers that's available right now. All the weapons are completely viable, but of course the Dancer and the Gunbreaker weapons are usually the most and bought quite often, since there are so few crafted weapons for these two classes. But otherwise, you're looking to make around 100k to up to 300k profit per one. The Hades trophy is also extremely expensive and very worth to craft, since it's almost double the amount of the map. The Barding is also good to craft, since on my server, you would indeed be making double, but even though it is much cheaper on Moogle, you can still be making at around 200k profit. The next Shadowbringers trial is the Cinder Drift Extreme. It drops the ruby plating that I would personally save for later when the weapons come out for this, but it is going for more than 200k right now. The ruby barding is going for 1 million on my server, but it usually is selling for around 300k, which is still profit, around 100k profit. The ruby weapon bust is also something that you can craft. It is not as high of a margin of profit as the other, but it is of course still profitable. The next trial in Shadowbringers is the Seat of Sacrifice Extreme. It drops the Plate of Light, and at 360k it is extremely profitable if you want to go and farm with 8 other people. But of course, Hades is still the best, but this is not so bad either. The Barding of Light is very profitable if you want to craft this at around 100k profit, and it is extremely popular since the barding itself is so pretty. And the Trophy of Light goes around the same as the barding is, but does not sell as often. The next trial in Shadowbringers is the Castrum Marinum Extreme. It drops the Emerald plating and is one of the cheapest mats you can get from the trial, so not very worth farming more than the others. Although it is definitely worth buying, since there will 100% be a crafted weapon later on in the next expansion. The Emerald Barding is of course profitable at around 100k profit, and the Emerald Bust a lot more profitable on my server, but on average, same margin of profit at 100k. And the final trial in Shadowbringers is the Cloud Deck Extreme. It is only going at 300k, so of course Hades is the best thing to farm right now, and the Diamond Weapon Bust does not go for much profit more than the mat itself, but the Diamond Barding is much more worth it. So that is all the ways you can make Gil by farming old raids, old trials, either by yourself or with a full group. And also, liking and commenting really helps my videos, so if it's not a problem to you and you enjoyed the content I make, please make sure you do so. So with that being said, I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!